Hello and welcome to week 14. So I hope that everyone enjoyed their little bit of a breather last week, although I'm sure that you continued working on your assignments for this class and other classes, but at least there was not any additional reading or work that you had to do. So I hope that everyone had a chance to at least take a few moments to breathe and relax before we get into the last few weeks of the semester. So we only have two more theorists that we're going to be looking at before we are finished with the course and pretty well finished with the textbook. And so we'll have one theory this week and then one theory next week, and then that's actually going to be it. So this week you're going to be looking at two theorists who worked together to create a particular theory. And so you're going to see that it's LeVay and Wenger. And I thought it was interesting that neither one of the names are pronounced the way that they look, but yet it says that they're from the United States. But their theory is kind of interesting because they're looking at social situated learning theory. And so in reading through, you're probably going to see that you actually see this in practice, but we just didn't know what it was called. So this theory actually takes social learning theory a step further. So normally when we're looking at the social learning theory, which were, Bandura, really kind of the behaviorist perspective, they really focused on the importance of modeling and imitation. And so social situated learning theory takes that a step further. And so now what they are proposing is that students need to get away from being passive learners and instead they need to become active learners. So active learning is something that is really well thought of in the educational world. Because we do want students to be an active part of their learning because we know that's what's going to actually stick with them. So when you're looking at this theory, you're going to see that they are putting the students kind of in the middle of the learning. They talk about things like communities of practice, which we see learning communities all the time. We see collaboration in the classroom all the time. And so really this particular theory is kind of shifting a little bit away from that social learning theory, definitely still focusing on the social aspect of being a participant in learning, but they've just taken it a step further so that students aren't going to be passive, they're going to be active instead. So when you look at what I have for you this week, like I've done all of the other weeks, I try and find a quote that the theorist actually said. And so I also thought it was interesting that LeVay is a woman. And so we really haven't seen many women in this course and in theory in general. We saw Maria Montessori, but pretty much everything else has been male dominated. So it's interesting that we do have a female. Now, Wenger actually is male, so it was a male and a female that were working together. But then I always try and find a practical graphic for you so that you can see things like community of practice. That's definitely a big part of their theory. The textbook as well as the readings and the videos will also mention legitimate peripheral participation. And as always, situated learning is what we're looking at. So just kind of how their particular theory is broken down in some of the different aspects. So this is actually a chapter from a book that LeVay authored in looking at situated learning. And then here's the PowerPoint that goes along with this particular theory. So I have two videos for you. You're going to notice that this one is actually Dr. Etienne Wenger. And so it is, like all of the other ones, slightly lengthy. But I do think that it's great for you to have access to primary sources, and especially when the theorist is able to discuss their own theory. Nobody's going to know it better than they are. And so at least you have the link if you are interested in learning more about it. But I did find a much shorter video that kind of gives a synopsis of their particular theory. So you, as always, have your journal. And so I continue to be so impressed with your journals, and I really hope that you are finding that it's helping you as you're writing your final philosophy paper. You have analyzed all of the different theorists, and you have had to talk about how you're going to use it. And so really what I expect to see in your philosophy paper is bits and pieces of a lot of different ones. I appreciate it when you are honest and say, I don't really agree with this theory, or I don't really think that it works in practice. I know that for me, I remember sitting in graduate classes and I would have a really hard time if an instructor was teaching me something about classroom instruction, but yet they hadn't been in the classroom, or they hadn't been in the classroom in a really long time. And so that's why I try so hard to make my courses practical and applicable, because you are going to be in the classroom. I have been in the classroom. And so I want it to be something that you feel like you can take and use. But part of discovering who you are as a teacher and what you believe is actually throwing out things that you don't actually agree with. And that's totally fine. So don't ever worry if you're writing in your journal that you don't agree with something, because I appreciate the honesty. And we're all different. Part of discovering who we are is figuring out who we're not. And so I think that that's just as valuable. So as I said, we only have one more theorist to go after this one. And so the only assignment that you have left for this course is your final philosophy paper. The link is available for whenever you're done, but it isn't due until the last week of the semester. So this week I will be working on grading your book reviews, and so I really hope that that was an activity that you enjoyed as well, because it gave you the opportunity to either learn more about a theorist that you didn't already know, or to actually dig deeper into someone that you were already interested in. So I look forward to reading those, and I'll have those graded this week. So have a fantastic week learning about LeVay and Wenger, and I will see you next week.